Hello, world. This is Just Being Intentional. I am Thomas Harris, the host. Thank you for checking in with us. You got a million other podcasts you can be listening to right now, but here you are with us. So we greatly appreciate it. If you can do me a favor, just go ahead and like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do. Just keep tabs on what we're doing here. We just want to keep this thing going, so we appreciate your support. Let me introduce my guest for today's show. He is a former Green Beret in the U.S. Army. He is also a former football player. He is the co-founder of Emerging Vets and Players, and he's also an actor and a filmmaker. Nate Boyer, welcome to the show.
Thanks,
Thomas.
For
being here, sir. Appreciate you.
Honor. Yes, sir.
You have quite a resume there. It's still growing, I'm sure, because you're always wearing all these different hats. So you got a lot of things going on in your life. Let's start with the past. Let's get a little bit of backstory on Nate Boyer. Who is Nate Boyer? Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about what that was like growing up.
Yeah, I was born in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is right near Knoxville. I was going to veterinary school at the University of Tennessee, and my mom was an environmental engineer at Oak Ridge National Lab out there. So born there, but when I was maybe 2 years old, they moved to the San Francisco Bay. My mom got into this doctorate program at UC Berkeley, and my dad got a job at Golden Gate Fields, horse racing track out there year round, out on the West Coast. And he's from Oregon. My mom was from Colorado. So being back out West made a lot more sense for them. And so growing up there, I grew up in the East Bay, a town called El Cerrito. Sports fan since I was a little kid, huge sports fan. So
Niners, right?
Niners, San Francisco Giants, Golden State Warriors. Those were my teams, and they still are. Very lucky as a young person to have our football team be such a dynasty because, between they won 5 Super Bowls, starting with the year I was born. Obviously, I don't remember that one, but I vaguely remember the second one, and I definitely remember the last 3 up until the early 90s. And so that was cool, from being a little guy till I was 13. They were great. It was Joe Montana and Steve Young, and then, of course, Jerry Rice and Roger Craig. And, eventually down the road, it was Deion Sanders and Terrell Owens. Just so many legends, and we were always really good. So I loved football, but didn't play it growing up. I played baseball, I played basketball, I played soccer, I played everything else, and kind of regretted that. And I know we'll get to that later, but it was something that sort of stuck with me for a long time. So, I finished high school up there. Didn't really want to go to college, or wasn't sure where I would do in college or where I would go. Didn't really perform particularly well in high school. So I moved down to San Diego after high school and started working on a fishing boat and taking some firefighting classes because I thought that's what I was going to do. Wasn't quite ready to grow up, so it took some other things to happen in life before I took the next big step. Yeah,
that's some of those details that I wasn't familiar with. I guess we never went back that far about what it was like the young Nate Boyer growing up. So obviously you were a Green Beret in the Army. What was their motivation, one, for joining the military, and then more specifically, why Green Beret?
I had a recruiter over to the house when I was a senior in high school, but I don't think I was very serious about it. It was maybe a tactic to scare my parents a little bit or something. I don't know. I thought about it because I knew that, or at least thought that college maybe wasn't going to be the next step for me. A couple years after high school graduation is when 9/11 happened. And that, of course, got a lot of people thinking, not just me, and a lot of people joined the military at that time. I was 20 years old and I was living in Southern California. I'd moved up to LA by that time. And I just was, I just didn't think I could handle that kind of responsibility. I just wasn't really sure of myself in that way. I lacked that confidence and initiative, and I didn't know how to work, and I didn't have a ton of structure in my life, and, just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, which there's some value in that, not being too rigid, but I also just I was just kind of floundering. And then, a couple years later, I ended up doing some relief work in the Darfur. It's a region in Western Sudan that is still war torn, and there's been a long ongoing genocide in that area. And when I went out there in 2004, in a short period of time, 300,000 people had been killed, and there was, mostly women and children sort of flooding these refugee camps across the border into Chad. And they were understaffed, and I had read this magazine article about what was going on, and I just was not in a great place in my life. I was 23 and felt like all my friends were graduating college and starting their lives and, had careers and opportunities. And I was like just doing odd jobs and not really sure, who I was. So I ended up going over there and doing some relief work for about 60 days and completely changed my life and perspective on things. And also an appreciation for how lucky I was to be in the position I was, in America, honestly. And
would you say that there was a lack of purpose that was there for you?
Oh, huge.
We share the same sentiment in that, when I joined the military, I didn't feel like I had any purpose. So one thing that's great about the military is that it provides an opportunity for those who kind of rudderless, we're just trying to figure things out and we don't really have any direction, and kind of gives us that platform to try to do something different, and see what happens.
Yeah, no, you hit it on the head. I mean, that was exactly how I felt. I just felt like, if I wasn't around, everything would be just fine. And that's not a great feeling, like
same thing.
Not that I want everything to fall apart if I'm not around, but everybody wants to feel like they belong and that they make a difference and that their life matters, in some way.
Yep.
And there's a reason to get up in the morning and people rely on you. Like, we need that. And so I didn't feel that way. And after just spending those 2 months over there, I felt that at least a little bit. And I wasn't a doctor or doing anything spectacular. Right. I was just helping, but it was people that needed help, and they needed people doing the little things too.
Serving.
Serving. Exactly. Hanging out with some of the elders there and helping pass out food rations and playing soccer with kids, like super simple stuff. Anybody could have done what I was doing. I wasn't an engineer or a medical professional in any way, but I was just, doing the dirty work as well, and just the little things. So like that was super important for me, and like sort of my development and growth into feeling that way, and building a little bit of confidence and feeling like, okay, like people like me can find a place, I mean, anybody can find a place, but people like me can find a sense of purpose. You just got to kind of look for it, and you got to, get in where you fit in and all those things. And for me, fitting in was in the middle of a continent I'd never been to, and around people that, I didn't necessarily have a ton in common with, or even had big language barriers. It was towards the end of that trip, I started thinking about what was next, and like wondering, like, so now what? I'm not going to go work for the Peace Corps. Nothing wrong with that, but this just didn't seem like a good fit for me. And I ended up getting malaria, and this family took care of me over there. They had a mud hut with like an extra room, a little cot for me to recover on. And they put this radio next to my bed, and the only channel that came through was the BBC News. And I was listening to the Second Battle of Fallujah, like the play-by-play, essentially. And this was in the fall of 2004. And so I was just sort of felt like it was a message, from the cosmos that this is what I'm supposed to do next, join the military and go fight for those who can't fight for themselves. And so I came back to the States, found out about the 18 X-ray program, which was the Army's fast track into being a Green Beret. There was no guarantee you're going to make it. I think only about 20% of the people that, went to selection ended up finishing and earning that Green Beret. But you at least had a shot at it if you scored high enough on the tests. And so I was able to get into that program and eventually earn my Green Beret. And
why that program?
Just because the Special Forces, like their mission, this unconventional warfare, everything you're doing is foreign internal defense, which means, you're fighting alongside, living with, training indigenous forces. So these people, Iraqis or Afghans, for the most part at that time anyway, like you are working hand in hand with them. And that was important to me after spending some of that time in the Darfur. Like I wanted to be around the people we were intending to serve.
So that was a big part of your motivation, right?
Totally. And eventually a lot of the military adopted that anyway. Like by the time things shifted several years later, as the war continued to grind on, there was a lot more of partnered work being done, partnered missions, not just with special forces, but the special forces led the way on that. And their motto is De Oppresso Liber, which means to free the oppressed. And that really spoke to me as well. I just enraptured by that motto. It just sounded like that's who I want to be. That's what I want. I want to be a part of freeing those, or being a part of the mission to free those that are sort of experiencing this ultimate oppression.
So you've been to war, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm inviting other vets to be on the show. I'm a veteran myself.
Yes, you are.
Also part of a elite group, the submarine force. But
you're the tallest one that ever. One of the tallest ones that ever.
Yeah,
you were a lot taller when you joined, though, right? Didn't you? It shaved you down.
I'm usually taller than most people I'm standing next to, but I still don't consider myself very tall. We had two guys on the ship that were 6'5" and 6'6", and I'm sure they got some horrible neck issues right now.
Yeah,
big time.
Yeah, exactly.
Going to war, just like a lot of vets that you and I know, being a part of MVP, we meet so many of our peers that are veterans who've been to war. They've experienced great traumas from war, PTSD, the things that you've seen that you can't unsee. Even when the lights are off and your eyes are closed, those images are still heavily ingrained in your brain. Share some insights on some of those challenges with the traumas that you faced firsthand being at war.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of different things that people experience, and everybody's experience at war is very nuanced. That's one thing. I think people like to put a blanket statement on post-traumatic stress, and they also generally, and it's not their fault, it's the way the media sort of spun this, but it's like, oh, this is a veteran issue. People that have PTSD are veterans. And it's like, well, some of them are, but there's plenty of people that never joined the military or went to war or, were any kind of combative situation that have post-traumatic stress. It could be from childhood. It could be from a car accident. It could be from a million things, right? So like, that's one distinction to make sure and remember, because everybody's experience, even those who did go to war, are very different, and, we don't all have, our best friend dying in our arms. And even if we did, people would react to that differently. People would have a different response to that. It was, early on my very first deployment, we were on a convoy, and one of the vehicles on our convoy was, hit a roadside bomb, and the driver was killed instantly, and, the gunner was ejected, and people got caught on fire, and somehow only one of those people passed. Our medic actually ended up saving a couple of those guys' lives. It wasn't even a big firefight at that moment or anything like that, but it was just this huge shock to the system. No matter how much of the 2 years of training in the infantry and the special forces I'd gone through, it was still just like, when it's real, it's different, And I just remember the smells and the, I guess they would call it the fog of war or something. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't call it that, but that's what it sort of felt like. I was trying to get my bearings and like figure out what's the best way to protect the guys around me. Like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Beyond just making sure I'm pulling security somewhere and like gathering intel and making sure the situation is under control and, all of those things, taking orders. But I just remember like smelling barbecue chicken, and I was like, who's barbecuing chicken right now? And then realizing that's the smell of burning flesh.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Things like that you just don't think about. And so now, and probably forever, there's certain, when a car door slams or somebody drops something in the kitchen at a restaurant, it shatters, or they, shoot the cannon off at the Texas football games when we score a touchdown, I jump, and it's quick. Mm-hmm. It's not like it sends me into this spiral, but that I feel that. And if I'm at a barbecue and I smell that familiar smell, like my mind does go there for a heartbeat. So just things like, it's just one example, but just things like that, you'll kind of never forget. And that was just I was in gunfights down the road and experienced a lot of different things in my time. And I experienced a lot of long periods of time where nothing happened, and it was like the most boring time of my life, for months between the three combat deployments and even some of the other rotations where it's like, a whole hell of a lot of nothing is going down. You got to stay switched on. You can't get complacent. You always got to be ready, because before you know it, you're going 100 miles an hour every day for weeks on end. And, you're kind of grateful for the downtime you had, and you can't wait for the next one. And
right.
So it's just it's hard to really put those things into words. I try to do the best I can through senses that maybe people can relate to a little bit, because unless you're there, it's just like anything, if you don't experience it for yourself, it's really hard to relate to.
Yeah. There's a stigma that PTSD only associates with those that have been in war. Reality is that trauma is for anybody. Everyone has experienced some form of trauma, whether it's verbal, physical abuse as a child from someone close to you. People that I deal with who experience homelessness, there's traumas there, but it's more of a human issue. So we have to kind of separate that from just being a veteran or someone that's been to war. Trauma is a human thing. We're just trying to educate people on that, to just, teach people that it's not just somebody that's been to war that's going to be shell shocked or suffering from PTSD. It's trauma is trauma, and it doesn't really have a specific identity. So let's transition talking from going from time in service to walking on at the University of Texas Longhorns. How did that come about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I had those regrets of not playing as a kid, and it just stuck with me. I mean, through my teens, into my 20s, and I was in Iraq actually when I had the opportunity to reenlist. I was a year out of my contract, and I was 28 at the time, and I was like, man, if I don't go to college now, I'll probably never go. Maybe I should do that. So I decided to go to school instead, and go to, I eventually reenlisted into the Texas National Guard. So I still was in the military, but, I told myself too, wherever I go to school, I'm going to try out for the football team. And University of Texas, it was, I'd loved Austin. I'd been there once and had a great time, and went back and visited once I came home from the deployment just to make sure, and went to campus. I mean, it's a great university. It's one of the best publics in the country. And they have a legendary football program, and I just love the city of Austin, and everything just kind of made sense. And so that's the only place I applied. And I started doing some online courses to get my grades up through Central Texas College, and transferred in as a sophomore, got accepted, left the military in January, left active duty anyway, in January of 2010, went to UT, went to Austin, and walked on, went to tryouts. And even though I hadn't played before, I was a decent athlete, and I prepared for it. I'd been working out for a good 9 months since returning home from the deployment, doing football specific drills and workouts. So I made the team as a walk-on safety, just on the scout team, really. So getting the team ready for the games on Saturday. And I got to dress out for the home games, but I wasn't on the travel squad or anything that first year. My sophomore year, I reenlisted into the Texas Guard and in the Special Forces still, which was cool. And I ended up doing a couple more deployments throughout my time in college. But I also started long snapping, which is a very thankless job. And, we're very used to doing the thankless jobs in the military. So I had no problem with that. And so long snapping, it's certainly not, you're not the star. Nobody really knows who you are unless you screw up. But you got to be precise, and you got to be accurate. You got to be consistent. And you got to set up the punter and the kicker to do their jobs, So I took a lot of pride in that, and ended up winning the job my sophomore year, and started for 3 years as the Longhorns long snapper, which was cool. The American snapper, as I like to call it.
All right. You are the co-founder of Merging Vets and Players organization I've probably been a part of since 2016. Before we talk a little bit more about that, can you just explain to the listeners what MVP stands for?
Yeah. So, real quick, I'll say that when football ended at Texas, I thought football was over for me, right? I was getting out of the military in February of 2015 out of the Guard. So I was going to be completely done. I played my last year at Texas in 2014, and I was pretty sure that was it, and that football was done, military was done. And I was like starting to think about what was next. And then all of a sudden I get this opportunity to play for the Seahawks for a very brief time. I was in training camp, played in the preseason before getting cut. And so then I get cut in September of 2015. And I had met Jay Glazer at Unbreakable Performance Center just a few months prior to that. And he'd helped train me some, and he helped me get my agent, and he really wanted to see me succeed on the football field. And, it was enough to just get into camp and kind of get that opportunity. But then I got cut, and I had, no more camouflage, no more jersey. Thought about going back in the military. Wasn't quite sure what was next. And Jay was like, hey, there's a lot of people in your shoes. And I've been thinking about a way for us to work together and build something, because I want to bring together, vets and athletes. And I want to call it MVP, which would stand for Merging Vets and Players. And so we co-founded MVP at the end of 2015 and started really operating in about April of 2016, simply by bringing vets and athletes up to the gym to train together, and then to huddle up afterwards and just talk through our stuff, peer-to-peer open forum, not a lot of rules and regulations to it, just speak from the heart, and everybody's supporting one another, and we've got each other's back, and we're all going through this very similar things. Of course, war and playing sports are different, but that structure and camaraderie and identity with the uniform and team and locker room and all those things are very similar. And losing that is a struggle for both vets and players.
Yeah.
And so that's how it came about. And yeah, you've been with us really since the beginning, which is awesome.
I was going through my own transition for a very long time, just trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. And I remember getting that invitation from you and Jay, and there was a small group of ragtag individuals that came into Unbreakable, and we've been going ever since, and it's been quite a ride. I've had other opportunities that came through just being a member, and that's why I've been so passionate about the program. I believe in the message of it, and we're going to continue to grow, just keep growing, and individually and corporately, to just keep reaching those folks that could use this program.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're excited about getting things rolling in Nashville. And I just want to say thank you for taking the lead on that, brother. It really does mean a lot. And we've already done a couple of engagements out there, and actually 3 of them. And we're just going to continue to push for that. It's a great place for it. There's obviously a lot of veterans in the area. It's a big sports town. You and I were just out at Fort Campbell recently with the 101st Airborne and 5th Special Forces Group, and that was really cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Thank you to the Titans too for kind of getting on board. And I know that you've done some stuff with the Nashville Predators as well, and we're just building it, man, brick by brick.
Absolutely. More people will start learning more about MVP as we continue to put it out there and raise awareness. I'm going to use that a lot in my show, bringing on vets and people that are members of the organization. I just believe it's the right thing to do, to provide an outlet for those that are trying to figure out what the next steps are, or they just fallen off and they need community like they used to have. So we're going to keep doing that. Another big part of MVP is that you actually made a film about this program. You started getting into acting, Hollywood Nate Boyer. So it's been a pleasure to see you growing in that area, learning the acting side, and then MVP. You wrote it, you produced it, you directed, you starred in it. What was that experience like, just doing this film? MVP the movie is what it's called.
Yeah. First of all, it was a hell of a lot cheaper to make the movie if I didn't have to pay any of those people. So if I wore all those hats, then I don't got to pay those hats. And so that helped. That helped us get it done, because we did it on a shoestring. But yeah, it was during it was during the fall of 2020, and so the pandemic just kind of rolled on and didn't know when the end was coming. And there was a lot of people that were just wanting to get back to work and figure out something, work on, especially creative folks. And a lot of them in Los Angeles that found themselves out there because they were interested in, in film and television at some level. And I was one of those people. I took some acting classes when I first got out there after, football was over. And then I did an internship with Peter Berg at Film 44. And Pete had done, Lone Survivor and Friday Night Lights and a lot of football.
Love his work. Love his work.
Yeah. And I just learned a good amount from doing that internship, and enough to kind of get me started, and I developed this friendship with Braden Aftergood, who was Pete's head of features. Braden eventually became and is Sylvester Stallone's producing partner at Balboa Productions. So Braden heard I was working on a script about MVP, and Stallone had been to a couple of our huddles and, was supportive of what we were doing and what Jay had started. And he was a member of the gym out there for, I think, 6 months or so. From there, it was like I got notes from Braden, and then I started sharing it with other people and started getting this script crafted down. And, when the pandemic was going on, it was like, this thing's just got to happen now. I found out about the Hollywood Veterans Center being closed down. They'd lost funding. It was funded by the VOA and the VA, I believe. But, during COVID, there was a lot of casualties out there as far as businesses and nonprofits and all that.
Right.
We're grateful to have MVP as a charity survive that. And as sad as it all was, it was kind of an opportunity for us to make our movie, because we got a lot of talent in front of them behind the camera for next to nothing. And we had a ton of veterans who just wanted to help, and be a part of it. And so we made the movie, and it turned out pretty good. Like I said, it was such a team thing. And, I know I have a lot of those titles in it, but what people don't understand is there was other producers alongside me, and I had a co-writer, and, my cinematographer is an Emmy award-winning cat that I'd met through some work at the NFL that I was doing. And everybody was just doing it at a cut rate. Then you get people like Jay and Tony Gonzalez and Randy Couture and Michael Strahan and Howie Long, have a cameo in there. Wiz Khalifa gave us an original song. That's crazy. He didn't ask for nothing. And then Stallone puts his name on it as an executive producer, and Tom Arnold's in it. And, it's just goes on and on. Dan Loria and, our good friend Jared Bunch, who's a member and former NFL player. Crazy. And all these people just sort of gave and gave and gave. And then we got it done. And now it's out. And you know what? Paramount Plus is going to do an additional promotion for it coming up here soon, which is great. But it's on Paramount Plus if you have that. And if you don't, you can rent it for $4 on Prime and Apple TV and all these other places. So it's definitely out there. You can buy the DVD if you want.
It's not hard to find.
It's not hard to find. And I just really encourage people to watch that, because it's a good way to learn about really how we started. Of course, it's a movie. So it's there are some creative liberties, but it's all based on real people and real stories. Most of that script was written just from listening to people talk at MVP, and kind of hearing what that transition is like and what they're kind of going through. And it was just, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but incredibly rewarding. And I hope to make another one soon.
Hey man, you did a great job on that. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. I've told numbers of people about it, and we're going to get some more exposure on that film, because it's nicely done, especially with the shoestring budget that you had. And
thanks, man.
It's only the beginning, sir. One of the other benefits I had by being a member of MVP was that you introduced me to Mike Pereira from Fox, the rules analyst, and that got me into officiating high school football. I did that for 4 seasons, and I was the first one in that program to actually go out and work some games as a football official. So that was another benefit that I had, but just knowing Nate Boyer, because we get all these different connections. We can make all these different connections just by being a part of the program, because everybody wants to be involved in something that is going somewhere and something that has true meaning and purpose behind it. So
exactly.
Thanks again for that.
No, thank you, man. You were the inaugural Battlefields to Ball Fields official, the first official.
And the thing about, why I chose to do this show is to encourage people to just be intentional. I came to you because I had a need. I was struggling financially. I was on workers' comp, and I was like, I need to make a little more money to help support my family. So I came to you, and I remember you saying, I don't know how useful I can be, but I'll keep my ears open. And I was like, come on, bro, you're Nate Boyer. You have influence. You're the guy that went and spoke to Colin Kaepernick when he was taking a knee on the field. And you've done so many different interviews, nationwide. So I just I had a need. So I wanted to make that need known. So I came to you, and you presented this opportunity to meet Mike at Fox. And, that's just been the stories going forward with our members, is that we make connections, and it's pretty awesome. And it's just stressing the importance of what can happen when you're intentional. Just like my journey's been here in Nashville, being intentional about keeping this program moving forward. But I wanted to ask you before we go, what is it for yourself personally? What do you know that you need to be more intentional about, whether it's personally or professionally?
There are a lot of things, of course, but the number one that sticks out to me, and I always struggle with this, is just being able to say no and not feeling bad about it, not feeling guilty about it. Or just like when I'm tapped out, letting people, just verbalizing that, letting people know that, like, hey, I need a day, or I need a week, or I need a minute here just to kind of recalibrate. And because if you don't have, this as much as anybody, because you give a lot of your time and your work is involved with service still today. If you don't at least take some time for yourself and take care of yourself and refill your cup, like, you got nothing to give. And so, like, that's super important. So I'm just, because I have a lot of things I'm interested in, a lot of passions, and I love to hustle, and I love to be busy. I like to take on a lot. There is a point where it's too much and you're not doing something to the best of your ability because you said yes too many times. So it's like, it's just being better at identifying the time and place to say no, and not worry so much about missing out. Because I get that FOMO thing, and I'm just like, yeah, but if I say no to this, like, what if it's this incredible thing? It's like, well, so what? Like, someone else deserves to do it then, that can put more time into it. So let them do it,
Yeah. I'm grateful to God that he has allowed our paths to cross, and I call you brother today. I also, know that I'm thankful that my God has given me some purpose in life, and that purpose is to be of service to others. But the negative side of that is I can overcommit. I'm not God. I can't be God. And I've tried to be like God to the point where I just burn myself out. And so I just have to be mindful of that. But I'm committed to the furthering of this mission, which is MVP. And I'm happy to have you alongside me, trudging forward and making it grow, because there's so many veterans and athletes. Hopefully we can get more participation from our athletes. We're going to keep working on that. But
yes, we will.
I'm very fortunate and blessed to know you, brother. And I appreciate you, your life. I appreciate you coming on the show to let us know a little bit more about you. You've been on 1,000 different shows before. Privileged to have you on this one to support me. So thank you for that, sir.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me, Thomas. I love you too, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Much love to you, brother, and God bless you. All right.